Hello and welcome. I'm Josh Schimmels, publisher and CEO of the Los Angeles Business Journal. It's a pleasure to be here today, moderating today's roundtable discussion, Rebuilding LA, Considerations for the Future. Los Angeles stands at an important crossroads for the future. In the face of natural disasters, technological shifts, and evolving infrastructural needs, the path forward requires both resilience and innovation. In today's conversations, we're going to explore how we rebuild smarter, stronger, and with more equity. Not just recovering from the challenges that we face, but also preparing for new ones ahead. I'm joined today by an outstanding panel of experts who will share their perspectives on legal protections, technology advancements, and policy considerations shaping our region's future. Over the next 30 or 40 minutes, we'll dive into really important topics from wildfire recovery and legal reforms to emerging technologies, infrastructure innovation, and leadership lessons learned through the disruption. Before we start, I'd like to thank our partners for making today's conversation possible. Thank you so much for your time invested in this and for your involvement in our community of business. Thank you to Cox Castle, the Tech Consultants, and ZFZ Law. Thank you all so much. All right, we're going to get started. We've got a great conversation to have, so let me introduce our guest experts. First, we have Rachel Fissé, Managing Partner, ZFZ Law, Nick Mancini, President, the Tech Consultants, and David Waite, Partner, Land Use with Cox Castle. Welcome. It's great to have you all here. I'm going to start off the question for the entire group at a little bit of a macro level. So I'd like to ask each of you, what does rebuilding a more resilient Los Angeles look like from your standpoint? And perhaps in that, give us one challenge or one opportunity that you're currently seeing. Rachel, let's start with you.
Thanks for having me. I think what has become very obvious is that we need better mechanisms for early detection and emergency response, as well as we rebuild to really consider the spacing and the basic cleanliness and clearing out of areas where there could be extreme spread. So I think that will be on everybody's forefront of their minds as we start to rebuild these areas.
Nick, same question. What are your thoughts?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, by the way. It's an honor to be here and participate with this group. So the Tech Consultants is a company that provides IT services for businesses that don't have an IT department. That's typically going to be your 500 and fewer employees. So focusing on that segment, what does it mean to be resilient in the technology space? It means basically to have things like layered security. Layered security means having multiple different platforms to provide security to your environment. It means having redundancy in your system so you have failover. It used to be very expensive, but now by implementing cloud technologies, that's kind of built in. So instead of having multiple servers and all the technology and the cost to not only purchase it, but to implement it and maintain it, you can outsource all that to a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon and never have to worry about it again. And so moving your technology stack to the cloud is a super important component of building a resilient environment. It also means proactive monitoring, staying on top of the environment to detect and remediate any potential problems that might be noticed. Without monitoring, you're just a sitting duck. Business continuity is no longer optional. We have to bake it into every single system that we set up for our customers. As far as challenges and opportunities, challenges, bad actors. It used to be in my line of work, I'd have a team of people running around the valley, running around LA, and they were checking lights on servers to make sure they stayed green and didn't turn orange or red, if you remember those. Nowadays, everything we deal with is primarily cybersecurity based. It's just a battle to keep the bad guys out, and that's what we're doing. As far as opportunities in our space, The recent wildfires have given us an opportunity to open up conversations with clients and prospects to talk about what they saw happen to others, and now they're awakened to the fact that it could happen to them.
Yeah, Nick, you mentioned things like redundancy when it comes to trying to mitigate risk, in particular with unexpected natural disasters. That's so important. Thanks for sharing that. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, Josh, first, thank you for having me join you today. I'm really pleased to be here with you and with Nick and Rachel. There's an old saying we probably all heard, which is, don't let a crisis go to waste. And we have, I think, in Los Angeles, a number of systemic challenges that we've been facing for quite a long time. And in my world, as a land use attorney, I deal with entitlements in the permitting world. And clearly, Los Angeles has real challenges when it comes to how we permit, how we build, how we develop, how we evaluate the built environment. As you all know, we are experiencing a housing crisis in Los Angeles of really epic proportions. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we don't permit enough projects to make an appreciable impact on how we develop and how we do so efficiently and readily. I think the crisis in terms of the wildfires in the Palisades and Altadena have revealed that challenge in a very acute way. And so I see the opportunity being evaluating how the city and the county respond with new permitting protocols, new streamlining procedures, really shortening the timeframes in line with the governor and the mayor's executive decrees to get the permitting down to 30 days or less. Utilizing, and this will be something near and dear to Nick, utilizing new technologies and artificial intelligence to assist in the permitting and rebuilding. So I think I'm optimistic, Josh, that we are going to be able to turn the corner in a significant way when we recover and rebuild from these extraordinary, devastating events, so that we can actually build much more quickly, much more rapidly, and much more efficiently. And even though it's in the context of the fire recovery, I believe that writ large, we are going to use this as a basis for reforming the way we permit and develop in the city of Los Angeles. So I'm optimistic about the future.
David, I'm going to have us stay there for just another minute, because I think that segues perfectly into one of the questions I've got, and that's sticking with the physical landscape. You talked about zoning, you're talking about some of the challenges. How do you balance rebuilding and also innovation with existing regulations, with existing zoning challenges, with infrastructure challenges? I know that's not easy. What are your thoughts on how we do that?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we have some aging infrastructure, right, that is going to need to be evaluated and rebuilt. A lot of the water and sewer systems and electrical systems were substantially damaged during the wildfire events. And so we're going to have to think about how we rebuild that infrastructure in a way that is resilient, in a way that it's future-proof from future fire events. And I hasten to say that, unfortunately, wildfires may very well be with us for some time to come, and we have to plan for them. And we have to plan for them in a way that we can prevent the devastating outcomes that we've seen this past year. So, undergrounding utilities and the like, I think is a big opportunity for us. It's a challenge because it's expensive, and how we finance that infrastructure improvement is going to be really significant in terms of how we're able to actually future-proof our infrastructure to support the rebuild effort. I would also say that, we're going to be having to adopt new and implement new resiliency standards, everything from hard-proofing our structures and our buildings to creating buffers and zones that will make our communities safer in the future. We're going to have to, enhance long-term sustainability in terms of these fire-prone areas. So defensible space is going to be a key part of how we rebuild. We'll take a look at our building codes. It may very well be that we're going to see new codes and new standards that come into play that effectively future-proof building materials, for example, and roofing materials, and how design of new structures is done in a way that minimizes the potential for fire damage. So all of that is in the mix so that we build back better. That's really the goal. It's not just building back quickly, but it's also building back better.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. We held a podcast a few weeks ago, and one of the topics was rebuilding, and the focus was really build back better. I think that's a phrase that we're going to hear here in Los Angeles quite a bit in the future. You know, as Californians, we're not new. Unfortunately, we're not new to natural disasters, fires, earthquakes, flooding, landslides. It's something that we've experienced for a long time and will probably continue to experience. When it comes to wildfires, and this question is for you, Rachel, what legal protections are already in place for Californians?
And that's a good question. And I think people need to know what they have what they have by way of protection already. I am an attorney who is suing Southern California Edison on behalf of Altadena residents and those affected by the Eaton fire. But what we do works hand in glove with the protections that our clients already have. And that is, generally speaking, a lot of protections that they have through insurance reforms and tax relief measures. And those are generally in place in states of emergency like this. And they're in place to keep insurers honest and to make sure that people really can go on living in the state of emergency while they need to rebuild. So they're reliant on insurance in the first point for most of what's going on, as well as various tax relief measures that provide. There's tax relief measure in the Revenue and Taxation Code, Section 194, and there are state level tax relief measures that are provided to emergency states as people are beginning to rebuild. There's also tenant protections, but what is most applicable to most people at this point are the insurance protections. And a few of those include a guaranteed 4-month advance payment of ALE, which is alternative living expenses for people that have had a total loss of their home. So, and the key word there, I think, is advance, because you are not required to pay it. Many people cannot have just lost everything and then also pay additional rent. There's still mortgage due. There's still obligations that people have based on homes that are completely uninhabitable. So that 4-month advance payment is definitely a protection that your insurer owes you. There is no longer a requirement for insurer-specific inventory forms for your contents, which means that the homeowners or renters may use their own property inventory form, not their carrier's form, which could have been labor intensive and almost impossible at an overwhelming time. Various categories of personal property must be accepted so that you don't have to list every shirt in your closet, basically every book in your shelf. You can say clothes, books, food items, DVDs, whatever it is that you're claiming, because it is really not practical for someone who has just experienced this incredible loss to go through an inventory of stuff that is completely gone. And there is a 60-day policy premium grace period requiring insurers to grant a 60-day grace period for premium payments on policies covering properties where there is a state of emergency and extending for 60 days following the end of the emergency. And that is just a few, but that does provide people with some comfort, some buffer as they attempt to rebuild.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in the last several months, I've had numerous conversations with insurance executives and legal professionals, and I've learned an awful lot about protections that are in place. And I think for me, one of the most important things is just getting the word out. There are so many people, including myself, who prior to early January were unaware of protections that were built into nearly every single policy in California. And there are still people who don't know what those protections are that they may qualify for. So I think conversations like this, conversations with legal professionals, conversations with insurance leaders are really important. I want to kind of shift a little bit to technology. So, Nick, we've already used the word resilience a couple of times, and in your world, from a technological standpoint, what does it look like in practice every day? So we talk about resiliency, we talk about technology, but what does that mean as you advise your clients?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And I have a question for Rachel. I'll ask a little bit later, touching on her topic related to insurance forms. In any event, resilience. So generally speaking, what we consider to be a resilient environment in the tech sector is an environment that's prepared for anything. So resilience is preparing for disaster, or at minimum, being able to effectively mitigate any problems that get introduced, irrespective of the cause or the source. So one of the things we like to talk about in our world is hardened systems. It's a great buzzword. What does it really mean? Hardened systems mean systems that effectively, you could think of them, have a hard shell around them, like a turtle or any other animal that's capable of protecting itself from outside factors. In our world, that means multi-layered security systems, but more importantly than just, say, buying or subscribing to 2 or 3 different applications to provide you with protections. It's really the proper implementation and configuration of these platforms to ensure that they don't fight each other and overutilize system resources, for example. And that takes a lot of expertise and a lot of time to do that properly. Another topic about related to hardening of systems, it's not just the internal IT, it's not just your computers, your network, and your tangibles, but it's also the hardening of intangibles. Most everybody these days relies on third-party email software like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, et cetera. Those systems, those platforms, when they're deployed, when they're handed over to you after you fill out the form and subscribe to it, they have a ton of security features, but they're all turned off, because if they were turned on, it would be impossible to use them. So hardening those systems is also really important. Again, it takes a great deal of expertise to go in there and properly fine-tune them to prevent them from being compromised by bad actors or third parties. I'll give you an example. The Microsoft 365 environment out of the box enables anybody to connect to it from anywhere in the world. So if you're traveling, no problem. You're in France, you're in Germany, you're in South America, it doesn't matter. You get an email on your phone. Well, we turn that off. Why? Because most attacks come from outside of the United States. So we require our customers to notify us if they're going out of town or leaving the country. I'm leaving the country tonight, taking a vacation starting tomorrow. And I told my staff, open up Cancun, Mexico for me, because that's where I'll be for a week. And I'll be able to get my email. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to. But again, being able to harden systems to prevent things like that from happening. My question for Rachel, earlier today, I was talking to a real estate videographer who typically does pictures and videos for homes that are for sale. And I decided, since I just recently completed a remodel, that I wanted to have my entire house documented primarily for insurance purposes. Is that helpful?
That's incredible.
Videos and pictures, top, bottom, drones, the whole enchilada.
That's incredibly helpful. I think that people don't know to do this until really something like this happens and they become aware of all that they don't really think of in their home. So they start to try to put together lists of what's going on in their house, curtains, what's happening in the living room. And I always advise people to look at family pictures, just things that you've naturally taken in the home to spark memory. But a video is obviously the gold standard. And in my line of work, not only is it helpful for your insurance company, but a lot of what we do is on top of insurance. And a lot of people are not really fully insured for all of the contents in their home. And it's incredibly helpful to have that inventory. So yes, you are ahead of the curve. But I think those kinds of situations and that kind of documentary evidence is definitely on people's minds right now.
Rachel, I want to stay on this topic a little bit longer. I've had conversations with readers and clients who, going into the wildfires, they struggled with their insurance. Perhaps they're in a high risk area. They couldn't afford the level of insurance that perhaps they wanted. So they were left with, what may have been some optimal insurance. And now after the fires, they're sort of seeing the effects of that. We look at things like SB 824. Can you tell us a little bit about how the provisions might help protect people looking for more access to insurance in high risk areas? I know it's a challenge to so many. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that is in part why a lawsuit against the entity here, SoCal Edison, that is, we are alleging in this lawsuit that they caused the fire. But that is exactly what people are seeking to recover in many ways, is what they are underinsured for. And there are so many people in that boat. So there are provisions in SB 824 that are protecting, attempting to protect people from that situation. But to be honest, it is more of a reporting requirement, more of a knowledge requirement in many ways than an actual full-on requirement relating to insurance. But one of the major protections is that there is a moratorium on non-renewals after a disaster for a year. So after a declared state of emergency, insurers are prohibited from canceling or refusing to renew residential property insurance policies for 1 year. So that is a 1 year protection. When an insurer withdraws from a market, they must now tell the California Department of Insurance when they are planning not to renew or withdraw from writing policies in specific geographic areas. And I see this really coming to a head here in about 8 months. I think this is going to be a massive issue. So public disclosure, so they're enhancing transparency in the homeowners insurance market, in that the California Department of Insurance is required to publish data annually about insurer activity, including non-renewals, new policies written, and their market concentration. And there's a data reporting requirement by insurers, in that insurers must submit detailed data broken down by zip code to help regulators identify areas of coverage or non-coverage. So all of these are meant to provide information to the public so that they know what they're getting into. Maybe they even know really when they're moving into an area where insurance may be difficult, but it doesn't solve, I think, the entirety of the problem, which is getting a policy where you have full coverage for a loss in this kind of catastrophe.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess we'll have to, be on the lookout to see what changes come in the future. Nick, you mentioned a little bit about technology, and I'm going to come back to you. But David, I want to see if we can bridge that gap a little bit. So we've got the digital world, we've got the physical world. David, from your perspective, what innovations are kind of helping bridge these two, the physical and the digital, from a development and a infrastructure standpoint?
So actually, I've got a follow-up question for Rachel, which she can get to after I respond to your question. But my question is really relating to the stabilization of the insurance markets in California, which is, we've seen insurance companies who've decided to leave the state previously. And the question in my mind is, we don't rebuild and recover without a robust insurance market in the state of California, because you can't get a mortgage unless you have insurance. And so insurance is the key to homeowners who are rebuilding, who are going to be taking on a mortgage because they are likely underinsured. Many are underinsured. And therefore, if they're rebuilding, whether they're rebuilding to the same size of home that they had before, or perhaps even going slightly larger, they're likely going to incur indebtedness. And without insurance, they can't go get a mortgage. So stabilizing the insurance markets and allowing insurers to price according to risk, to me, seems to be something that is really on the near-term horizon as part of the rebuild and recovery effort. So I would pose that question to Rachel as a follow-up. So in response to your question, Josh, I think by some estimates, utilities are responsible for something like 11% of all wildfires nationally. And the resulting damage that occurs from those fires is about 50% of the damage. So it's very, very significant in terms of the utility contribution to wildfires. Now, there are costs from other sources as well, but it's clearly an area that I think is ripe for technological innovation and reform. And so what we're starting to see is a whole sort of new suite of technologies relating to how wildfires are actually monitored as the wildfire commences. There's new sensor technology. There's new technology in terms of how quickly wildfires are spreading throughout particular areas where they are ignited. And then, of course, we have a whole litany of new technologies associated with controlled burn areas, where we're really trying to thin the forest and thin the wildfire areas so that they become less potent when a fire occurs. And those are on the interface between development and forested areas. And there's a ton of new technologies that are being implemented to control those burn areas. In addition, we're seeing sort of new smart grid technology so that when there are high wind events in the state of California, for example, we can shut down the grid on a moment's notice to make sure that the grid is shut off, so that in the event that a power cable is impacted by a windstorm or a transformer is impacted, that the electricity is shut off in that area where the grid is essentially pushing a lot of electrons through the system. And so a lot of new technologies are being developed to really bridge that gap between managing both the frequency and the intensity of wildfires. And so we're going to keep seeing more and more of that technology as time goes on.
Thank you. Rachel, do you want to take a stab at the insurance carrier problem / question?
It's such a severe and pervasive issue. And I think that you're right. I mean, pricing it according to risk, but then you are just plain old pricing people absolutely out of the market of affording insurance. I mean, this has been a real issue, not only in wildfire issues, but in Malibu for many years. And can only cash buyers buy those homes. So I think, to be honest, I think the California Department of Insurance is going to have to step in and do a little bit more in what they're requiring out of the insurers. In high risk, maybe they're balancing high risk with their low risk areas, and there becomes some sort of requirement as to what they have to carry. And of course, pricing and all of that comes into it. But people have to be able to rebuild their homes, carry a mortgage, get the loan to rebuild the home, and have the insurance to be able to do all of that. So I think we are really now at the precipice of some major insurance issues coming down in California.
Yeah, Nick, I promised I'd come back to you. We can't have a conversation, or at least a lengthy one today, without talking about AI in some way. From your perspective, what type of tools, such as AI, such as the digital space that we live in, automation, data platforms, how are those shifting in ways that allows you to deliver more value to your client?
Yeah, great question. AI is all around us. So I think it's a major milestone in technology. The first one probably being the introduction of the personal computer in the early 80s, maybe 1980, 81. The second being the introduction of the internet, and that becoming kind of the superhighway where everything connects to everything. And the more recent introduction of AI. I think those are three massive milestones that have occurred over the last, we're looking at close to 50 years now. And we're just seeing the beginning of AI, just like when the internet first came out. Yeah, great, we can go to somebody's website, but now internet basically drives everything, including this conversation here. So AI, yeah, AI is extremely amazing. That's the simplest way of putting it. Give you a couple of quick examples. Doing basic searches. You used to have to know your keywords. If you didn't formulate your search properly, you got garbage back. Nowadays, you can just ask an AI-based search technology like ChatGPT or even Google, ask it basic questions in as bad a structure as you would like to, and you will get positive results. But in business, AI is really transforming a lot of the automation. That's the cool part about what AI is really doing is behind the scenes. That is not just helping you write an email or formulate a letter or help you with your marketing. That's the cool, like to call it maybe above the surface benefits of AI. But behind the scenes AI is fascinating because it allows, for example, disparate systems to communicate with each other. I'll give you an anecdotal story. We implement AI with all of our customers. We integrate our ticketing system with their HR environment so that when they onboard or offboard employees, we're looped into that process automatically without our customers having to call us and tell us we're hiring these 5 people next week and you need to set up systems for them. It's just part of their HR process. They fill out their internal HR process, and behind the scenes, we get notified, kicks off our ticketing system, et cetera. So saves everybody time and money and prevents people from forgetting steps. It's also accelerating the speed with which we're able to provide service to our customers. By having AI scan all of our tickets, it absorbs all that information. And when we have a problem that may not be prevalent or a problem that we're not used to seeing, we'll just query our system in basic English, and it'll come back and tell us out of all the hundreds of thousands of tickets that we've processed, which ones might be similar, what were those solutions like, and we can get to a solution a lot faster than we were able to. So AI is a huge disruptor. It's good and bad. We talked about resilience, we talked about phishing, we talked about bad actors. They're using AI on the other side. So basically, we're going to be getting into, if we're not already there, good AI battling bad AI. In order to keep systems and keep people's data safe.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we're in an industry where AI is kind of considered a double-edged sword in journalism. On the one hand, half of my organization on the journalism and the research side frowned upon. AI can be very dangerous. You don't know where your sourcing is coming from 100% of the time. It can be damaging. On the other hand, the advertising, the audience development, the marketing side is encouraged to use it in certain different ways. So I think it's something we have to keep an eye on. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit. At the beginning of the conversation, we started off on a macro level. I want to zoom in just a little bit with Rachel. I want to look at Altadena. What does rebuilding Altadena look like in the aftermath of the Eaton fire? And what are some challenges and perhaps even some long-term opportunities there?
Altadena is the area most severely affected by the Eaton fire. And as we know, it has a lot of historical significance and it's an incredibly special community. And I struggle with how they're going to rebuild it in a way that captures all that Altadena is and all of the diverse and rich history that the community has. But I am with David, and I think we can rebuild better. And there are ways, and people are working hard on this. And one of the things that the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors has done is adopting zoning restrictions to limit development in Altadena's high fire hazard zones. And that plan directs development away from the foothills, aiming to reduce the future wildfire risks and preserve that beautiful natural landscape. And while some residents in Altadena have expressed concerns about reduced development potential, many residents of Altadena really do support these measures just for the sake of safety and the environmental preservation. California officials have also released new wildfire hazard maps that expand the areas where wildfire building codes apply. And in Altadena, this expansion includes over 500 additional homes in the Eaton fire footprint. And that will be effective soon. And that will mean they will have to use fire resistant materials and fire resistant designs in the rebuilding. And Pasadena has developed a multifaceted approach to assist its residents as well, including assigning dedicated staff planners to each damaged property and creating a team of community connectors that will guide homeowners through the recovery process. They've also approved temporary orders that exceed the state emergency provisions. Property owners are allowed to rebuild structures in different locations on the lot, provided that they meet the specific setback requirements. But that also means that smaller homes are eligible for a minimum of 150 square feet or 10% more additional space, whichever is larger between the two. And recognizing there are potential delays to regional impacts on labor and materials, Pasadena has requested an additional year for approval periods of entitlements and building permits. And they are also exploring fee reductions for both temporary uses and building permits to alleviate some of the financial burdens on the residents. So really thoughtfully rebuilding is what is going to be important here, and allowing people to rebuild in a way that may suit them and make it a little bit easier to get the homes up.
Yeah, I think thoughtful rebuilding is a good term to use. And that's something that we can also take and learn from other cities or regions. You know, Los Angeles is not the only city, region, or even country that experiences substantial natural disasters. But here we've got New Orleans, the Carolinas, we've got Florida. We look at what Tokyo has had to endure, but we can also learn from them. There's a lot of lessons learned. So David, I'm coming to you on this. What lessons can we take away from all these great regions who've experienced natural disasters? What's the takeaway for us to create smarter, more inclusive, and more effective planning moving forward?
So, Josh, we have an enormous challenge ahead. The numbers are familiar to all of us. 12,000 homes were destroyed between the Altadena and Palisades fire, 16,000 structures. The enormity of the disaster is incredible. It's unprecedented by really any standard. We are estimating that when things really start to ramp up, the city and the county each will be processing somewhere between 250 and 350 permits per month for single-family rebuilds. We estimate that as many as 1,000 structures will be rebuilding on an annualized basis during the peak of the rebuild period. So the status quo in terms of the bureaucratic ability to respond to that level of demand is not going to be successful. And so as part of the project recovery effort that I've been involved with ULI and USC and UCLA, we've made a number of recommendations. And one of the critical recommendations that we have made, and I'm really happy to see Mayor Bass has embraced it last week, is the idea of professional self-certification, whereby licensed architects can certify the plans and specifications that they prepare as being fully code compliant. And that shortens the time period substantially. In the city of Los Angeles alone, just to get a zoning clearance on a home takes about 3 months. And with self-certification, with a new emerging digital AI model, that can be done literally in seconds. So we are really optimistic about the potential for professional self-certification, coupled with new digital technology and AI models that will really enhance the plan check process. In the city of Los Angeles, to permit a single family home today or previously took about 1 year. So if you can imagine that for 6,000 homes in the Palisades, how long that process would take, you'll never get there. And part of the problem for homeowners deciding to return to these communities, it's a function of both time and cost. So if the uncertainty with respect to permit delay and the cost to rebuild are uncertain, families will simply say, I'm not going to come back. I'm going to go move on with my life. I've got small children who are in school. I'm not going to wait it out. So the uncertainty just does not enhance the ability for homeowners to decide to come back. There's another critical component to this, Josh, which I think Rachel alluded to earlier, which is the optionality that we need to provide to homeowners who are going to be rebuilding. And that optionality is a function of cost. Not every homeowner is going to be able to afford to custom rebuild their home in as much as they might like to go out and hire an architect, go through the permitting process and do a custom rebuild. Not everybody's going to be able to afford that. Most homeowners are underinsured. So the optionality that needs to be created is to get the price point down on a per square footage basis to somewhere around $400 or $500 a foot for those who need to be able to get back at a reasonable cost within a reasonable time period. For the custom rebuilds, those are all going to be $1,000 or more a foot. And that's simply not going to be a viable option for a lot of homeowners. So one of the things we have to do as part of the rebuild is to provide optionality through, and I know this is a bit of a scary term, but the idea of production housing. And remember, the Palisades in Altadena were at one time, when they were built in the 50s and 60s, that was a lot of production housing. It's since been morphed with renovation and other rebuilds, but it started off as production housing at an affordable cost. And production housing can be really quite good in terms of the quality. And in addition, the production housing, you're going to have lots of different options for homeowners in terms of different architectural styles, number of bedrooms, building materials. They'll be able to customize each one of them. But in order for us to get people back, we've got to get the cost down and we've got to shorten the time frame to get permitted. So get down to $400 a foot and get people back in 3 years. That's the gold standard for getting people back. If it's more expensive and takes longer, people will move on. It's just that simple. So we've really got to shorten the time frame and provide that optionality. Those will be the keys to success in terms of getting people back to these communities.
Yeah, thank you, David. I mentioned earlier clients and readers and people that I know in both areas affected by the wildfires. You just see such challenges with making that decision. Do you wait? Can you afford to rebuild? In some cases, your children's schools are gone and you're in an old Sears building now attending school. In some cases, you're in schools 4 cities away because they're trying to accommodate. It's a really tough decision. All right, so we are coming a little bit towards the last third. I want to make sure we get through all of our questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of shift to a rapid fire format. Okay. I'm going to ask a question, ask everybody to just condense their responses a little bit so that we can get through it because we have a few really great questions left and I want to make sure that we have time. On the concept of rapid fire, Nick, this question is for you because, as leaders, sometimes technology decisions that we make take months and years to build up, to understand, to pull the trigger on, and then to implement. But leaders don't always have that time frame. So my question to you is, your clients have to evaluate, they have to weigh in, they have to commit. How do you do that and also take in consideration speed, risk, and costs? How do these all balance out?
Yeah, great. Another really great question. Thank you for that. So first of all, that's not easy. And in our space, which is what is considered the small and medium business, your 500 and under sized companies, a lot of times the internal management doesn't have the skill to do that. So they rely on third parties like us to assist them. And so we're the interface between dozens, if not hundreds of vendors trying to get our customers' business and them potentially shelling out money unnecessarily to the wrong vendor. So part of our job is to vet every single potential vendor. We get solicited all the time from software makers, from cloud providers, from anybody in the tech industry wanting to partner with us so that we can move their product to market. And part of our process specifically is that we vet everything extremely carefully before we bring it to market because we're going to be placing our reputation on a third party. And it's very important for us to maintain that reputation with our client base. So there's a vetting process and it's thorough, it's time consuming. it's expensive. It's an expense that we carry. And typically we see anywhere from 6 to 18 months from the time we decide to look into something to the time that we're able to roll it out. Generally speaking, we're not seeing any platforms that require an immediate rollout. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I know we're in rapid fire mode, so feel free to follow up. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off to that. You mentioned cybersecurity earlier, and I'll tell you, I attend a monthly cybersecurity meeting to understand new risks, new assessments every single time, and it changes constantly. If you had to pick maybe one or two of the largest cybersecurity threats that you think are going to impact small and mid-sized businesses over the next year, what might they be? Or is it just the simple concept of not paying enough attention to the fact that it's impacting everybody? What are your thoughts?
So part of the problem is trying to make it as convenient as possible for the typical end user to not be terribly impacted by the layers of cybersecurity that are being put around to protect them. And ways of doing that and allowing them to maintain their productivity and being able to get their job done is to have a company like us, or if you're a large organization, you have your own internal IT department, put layers in place to prevent the execution of unvetted software. So your viruses, your phishing campaigns, all those things are really just executable programs, now called apps. We used to call them applications. Well, okay, so we've shortened that to apps. But at the end of the day, anything that's going to damage an environment or infect an environment is an executable program. And there are ways to prevent executable programs from executing because they're not listed in the list of approved applications. So even if somebody were to try to install something, if it's not on that list, that client's list of approved applications, it just doesn't run. And an alert gets sent to the security team to potentially mitigate a potential problem or find out what the source of that is. That's one of the easiest things that an organization can do. It's called application whitelisting. It's complex, it's expensive, it's difficult. It's part of the services that we typically provide. But I think that is one of the most effective ways of minimizing the introduction of unwanted applications. And that can also go beyond just bad software like bad actor stuff. It could, for example, prevent the introduction of pirated software into an environment, which would hold the business liable for the introduction of unauthorized software. So it's a pretty good product. It's pretty good. There's a couple of different companies out there that do it. And we think that is probably, if I had to pick one, that would be the platform that I would roll out to everybody in the absence of being able to have a multi-layered approach.
Thanks for that, Nick. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. All right, Rachel. So for business leaders and readers of the Business Journal who may not be familiar with AB 3012, maybe high level, what is it? Why is it important? And how is it going to help promote a smoother recovery in the future?
So AB 3012 was introduced in 2021, and it was several amendments to residential property insurance regulations that are really just meant to enhance the protection for homeowners after disasters. And just to highlight three easy ones, contents coverage. So in the event of a total loss of a primary dwelling due to an emergency, an insurer must pay 30% of contents coverage without even an itemized claim. So up to $250,000. Additional living expenses, which we hit on earlier. But the other thing that it's doing here is for a covered loss that renders a home uninhabitable due to a state of emergency, the insurer must provide the ALE coverage for at least 2 weeks with additional 2-week extensions for good cause. And the third one that I think is notable here is that there are land value deductions prohibited. And that means an insured who opts to rebuild or replace their home at a different location after a total loss, so these are the folks that are they're moving, is entitled to damages equivalent to the amount that would have been recoverable had the dwelling been rebuilt at its original site. And there is not to be any deduction for the land value at the new location.
Thank you. I mean, I'll tell you, probably a question for another time, but I know I've also heard stories of those impacted who've not necessarily lost their home, it's not burned, but a significant impact on smoke damage, and watching some of the challenges that residents are having with their insurance carriers, sort of, well, what is inhabitable, what's not, what's covered, what's not, when there's still a dwelling in place, and what is considered significant enough damage that you can or cannot live there.
Those issues are incredibly live. People are mired in them right now. Smoke and soot damage is very real, and insurance and homeowners and those that are responsible for examining like the toxicity of a home and other things, are not always in agreement with insurance. These are a lot of issues that we handle on the back end for people that are, again, underinsured or not receiving insurance for these kinds of damages. Also, you could have a home standing in a sea of other homes that were demised, but it doesn't actually mean that the structure underneath may not render your home a total loss. So there's a lot more than what meets the eyes in the homes that are really that survived, or you may think they survived the fire. So there is a lot going on, and a lot of debate between insureds and insurers right now. And that's a lot of the issues that we deal with on the back end in our lawsuit, actually.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in. I appreciate that. All right, we're down to our final two questions. The second to last one is to David. And this is kind of a high level. As business leaders, we get tested all the time. There's expectations that leading a company means you can navigate through challenges. What's a leadership lesson, perhaps, that you can share that you believe has emerged from being forced to navigate uncertainty and major challenges?
Josh, as I alluded to earlier in my comments, I will say that a really important leadership lesson was the convening of two of our most significant academic institutions, UCLA and USC, with the Urban Land Institute within literally 2 weeks after the fires. Dick Ziman at the UCLA Ziman Center convened a meeting of no less than 50 professionals who had subject matter expertise in a variety of different areas. And within about 6 weeks, that group was successful in publishing Project Recovery, as it is called, which really became, I think, the roadmap for how the city is going to recover after the wildfires. Chief Recovery Officer Steve Soberoff, in his 90-day report, he referred to Project Recovery as the city's playbook going forward for how it's going to respond to the wildfires. So I think the lesson there was convening top experts, subject matter experts, providing a structure for those experts to work within different specific subject matter areas where they could convene, research, analyze, and evaluate, and make specific recommendations. That, to me, was a lesson in leadership in terms of how we come together as a community. We volunteer our time and our expertise to really coalesce around a singular problem that is impacting our community writ large. And it was a very successful effort, and one that I think we're all going to look back on years from now and say that it made a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key word there is just collaboration. We're seeing it across the board, whether it's ULI and their partnership with CBRE. You're seeing the LA EDC. You're seeing, Steve Soberoff's impact in the 90-day report, which I did have a chance to read. There's just a lot there, and you're right. We're in a community, in a region where the people are coming together, and that is just sort of a schooling on leadership. All right, we're down to our final question, and again, it's for the group. So I'm going to ask you, from each of your perspectives, looking at the future, what is one shift, adjustment, change, so from a legal, a technological, or a structural standpoint, that you believe is essential to making Los Angeles, we're going to use that keyword again, even more resilient in the decade to come? Nick, let's start with you.
Sure. Great question again. I would say that ask yourself a question. if the building or buildings in which your business operates from were to suddenly disappear, irrespective of the reason why, would you be able to continue business later on that day by sending everybody home and having them work from home? Or if the disaster were even more widespread, could you have people move to a region outside of the affected area and log in and get to work? If you can't do that, you're at risk, plain and simple. There are ways to accomplish that. And simply put, moving most of the technology, if not all of the technology, into a cloud environment prevents the potential issue of having it get destroyed if your building is impacted. We had a customer years ago that asked us, an insurance company, they asked us to make them disaster proof, and we were able to accomplish that by getting rid of all of their technology, their in-house technology in the various states in which they operated, moved everything to the cloud, and when they were affected by the fires, the electricity got cut from their headquarters building for, I want to say 3 or 4 days. Even though their building was not directly affected, everybody went home and business continued as if nothing happened. If your business cannot accomplish that, then you are at risk. And that's the simplest way of putting it.
That's good perspective. Thank you, Nick. Rachel?
I tend to agree that technology becomes the answer in rebuilding an older city. So the upside would be in all of these areas is that we can now use technology for quicker response times, for quicker shutdown times, for really emergency response. There's no excuse for it to be inequitable in ways that some families are notified of a fire and some are not, or that some are, underground lines don't spread, or utility lines above that may. So I think there is an equitable way to use technology throughout this rebuilding such that it makes the rebuilt homes, the rebuilt neighborhoods, and the rebuilt communities, where these communities are so bonded, to have a fairer response and a more really just an equitable, thoughtful rebuild where people are on notice and where things can be stopped much quicker.
Thank you, David. Final thoughts.
So a great question and a great question to close with, Josh. Mayor Bass last week in her State of the City address, in a moment of what I would describe as extreme candor, described our permitting process in the city of Los Angeles as a broken system. And she's absolutely right. It's a broken system. We have incredible bureaucratic layering of processes and systems that are in dire need of repair and reform. We no longer have a Fortune 100 company that is headquartered in the city of Los Angeles. We have a development community that's essentially redlining the city of Los Angeles and going to outlying jurisdictions among the other 88 cities in the region and saying, we're just simply not going to deal with the city of Los Angeles. So I think we have an opportunity to undertake substantial and meaningful reform in the way we permit, in the way we develop, to shorten the timeframes, provide greater degree of flexibility and certainty in the process. And I think my wish, my hope for the takeaway from this particular crisis we're in is that we are going to rebuild and improve the structure within which we permit and develop in the city and the county of Los Angeles. And I'm hopeful that that will be the case.
Thank you so much, David. We heard a couple of times the concept of rebuilding better, which ultimately does require vision, an awful lot of collaboration, and a willingness to adapt to new realities. Today's conversation was incredibly important, incredibly informative, from legal protections and regulatory challenges to the role of tech and innovation. Just a lot of really important conversation that we need to continue having, and we need to spread the word and share this to other business leaders, share it with our audience. The road ahead is there. It's going to bring new challenges, but it's also going to create incredible opportunities for for us all to lead, to rethink, to rebuild better. I want to thank our amazing panel, Rachel, Nick, and David. Thank you so much for taking the time today, taking the time to prepare for this. We look forward to hosting a conversation similar to this in the future, perhaps an update 6 months from now on where things stand, what we've learned, and where things are going. But until then, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we look forward to hosting you again. Thank you.